nation. Chalk in hand, he's on a mission, shaping dreams with precision.
Hi everyone, welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. And we are back on this topic of ID cards. A little bit more information is available thanks to a summary that the BBC has created, and we're going to look at that now. And here we are. You can see the story here. What is the plan for digital IDs, and will they be mandatory? This is from 4 days ago, and it gives a wonderful intro to the topic of digital IDs here in the UK. For those of you who don't already know, here in the UK, we don't currently have any form of ID. The government is trying to change that, and we're going to read through exactly what they hope to do and the opposition that's against their plans. Here we are. So, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has defended the government's plans to introduce digital ID cards across the UK. He told the BBC the new system would cut the faff. That basically means cut the red tape or cut the bureaucracy for people trying to prove their identity in a range of scenarios, as well as showing they have the right to work. Little grammar mistake here. Showing they have to the right to work is wrong. Showing they have the right to work. The government says the scheme will be rolled out by the end of Parliament, meaning before the next general election, which by law must be held no later than August 2029, although I very much doubt the current government will be around. But anyway, that's not for me to say. Right, let's go on. Why is the government introducing digital ID, and will it be compulsory? Well, we've spoken about this before. It says here, once introduced, digital ID will be used to verify a person's right to live and work in the UK. Now, you'll notice here, there's no article. Once introduced, the digital ID, our digital ID, and this is more evidence that currently here in the UK, the article is beginning to disappear. And this is just one example of how that is taking shape. Okay, it tells us here this will be an app, and the ID, now I don't think we knew this before, will include information on the holder's residency status, name, date of birth, nationality, and their photo. Well, that immediately makes me suspicious. I don't want to be carrying that kind of information on my phone. The government, they have already said that the police will have no right to ask for it. Then what's the point of bringing it in if the police aren't going to be able to ask for it? But anyway, let's continue. We'll just move on a little bit here. However, the government subsequently told the BBC that the requirement for ID won't be applied retrospectively. It means it is not something current workers will need to show, with UK workers only needing it when they apply for a job after its proposed introduction by 2028. Now we're just going to read down here a little bit more to the interesting part. This is the opposition to the government, the shadow government, as we call it. However, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said that while there were arguments for and against, Digital ID, making it mandatory, requires a proper national debate. In other words, you can't just bring this in and expect us all to accept it. Another opposition party to the government says Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey, this is him talking, said his party would fight tooth and nail against the scheme. Okay, so to fight tooth and nail means to fight with every fiber of your being against the scheme, which would add to our tax bills and bureaucracy while doing, well, next to nothing to tackle immigration, the channel crossings, as he's called it here. And there's a picture of our Prime Minister. It says here digital ID will be available to all UK citizens and legal residents aged 16 or over and will be mandatory in order to work. I think they're not using the article here because it's now a system, digital ID. It's what they're bringing in. So they're treating it like it's, their thing. However, it will be optional for students, pensioners, or others not seeking employment. That doesn't make me feel good. The government will consult on whether children aged between 13 and 16 should be included in the scheme, since many already work part-time. Officials have stressed it will not function like a traditional identity card, and people will not be required to carry it in public. Well, what's the point of having it then? I don't understand. It says here, Sakia also confirmed that you won't need a digital ID to access medical services or go to hospital. Yeah, but it will help because they ask you for your name and date of birth anyway, and they also ask you for your national insurance number. Then it says, but the system is being designed to integrate with some government services to make applications simpler. So I just see this as being contradictory. Oh, yeah, we're bringing it in, but the police can't ask you for it. Oh, yeah, we're bringing it in so you can buy alcohol, but you'll only need to show it if you're asked for it, and you don't need to carry it with you anyway. It says here, in time, the government said that digital IDs would make it easier to apply for services such as driving licenses, childcare, and welfare, and to access your tax records. Well, then there is a ID card, is it not? If you needed to get a driving license. Very contradictory, and as usual with the government, very passive aggressive. You need to have this, but only if you want to download it. Yeah, something's wrong. It says here the ID could also be used to streamline verification processes across private sectors, such as when opening a bank account or buying or renting property. Well, that is an ID card. Asked about the costs, Sakia told the BBC he expected digital ID would save money overall because it stops fraud. Not if your phone gets hacked, it doesn't. And what about the people without smartphones? The government has promised the system will be inclusive and work for those without smartphones, passports, or reliable internet access. Well, I know at least one group of people, there's some very devout Christian people here, who are forbidden from using smartphones. They're like, they're like Puritans or the Amish in America. That would be the Plymouth Brethren. They don't use smartphones. It says here a public consultation expected to be launched later in 2025 will include looking at alternatives, potentially including physical documents or face-to-face support for groups such as older people or the homeless. Here's an interesting part. Why are some people against digital IDs? Civil liberties groups argue that even a limited digital ID could pave the way, that means make a road for, a more intrusive system, raising concerns about privacy, data security, and government overreach. Big Brother Watch, alongside 7 other organizations, wrote to the Prime Minister urging him to abandon the plan, saying it would push unauthorized migrants further into the shadows. More than 2.9 million people have signed a petition against introducing digital ID cards on the UK Parliament website. Yes. And let's continue here. Other prominent critics include the former Conservative Cabinet Minister David Davis. This is, again, the government's opposition. He said no system is immune to failure and warned that governments and tech companies have repeatedly failed to protect people's data. Sakir denied that digital ID would ever be used as a surveillance tool and said the scheme would absolutely have very strong encryption. For additional security, the ID will be held on individual devices rather than be stored in third-party data centers. Okay, well, that does make me feel slightly better about it because that's the way passwords are stored, but well, they will still see my date of birth when I set it up. Which other countries already have IDs? Well, the UK government has said it will take the best aspects of digital ID systems used elsewhere, including Estonia, Australia, Denmark, and India. Again, doesn't fill me with hope. Let's see. Okay. Has the UK tried to do this before? Yes. Tony Blair's Labour government tried to bring it in for people in the early 2000s on a voluntary basis, and we didn't like that. The scheme was scrapped in 2011 when I think they lost power. The UK has only had compulsory ID cards during wartime. Yes, my grandparents had them just to regulate rationing and the distribution of food. Although they stayed in place for several years after World War II, Winston Churchill's government scrapped them in 1952 after criticism about the cost and about the police use. Well, there we are. So lots of information there about the ID cards. Let's go to the petition website and see what the latest is with the figures there. Right, and here we are, 2,925,770 signatures. That's what we currently have for people who are protesting against ID cards. And I can see a number of other petitions arising as well. Oh, look, it just jumped up to 772. So there's also another petition calling on the government to have a national referendum to let us all vote on this because we don't want it. So as you can see here, this is really not popular. And as I mentioned the other day, the government have given a response basically saying they'll do it anyway. One of the news reports we looked at over the last few days has said that Keir Starmer is like King Midas in reverse. King Midas, as you know, he was the one who touched things and they turned to gold. Everything he touched became gold. but they're saying he's like King Midas in reverse. Everything he touches fails. So, will this ID card plan be something else which simply fails? Or do you think that Keir Starmer will be able to actually push this through Parliament? I doubt very much if it will get through for the whole of the UK. Probably in England it will, since the central governments look after England. But the other governments have already said that they don't want it, and given the chance, they will block it. There we are. So, yeah, that's currently our figures. And this is constantly changing. So you see these figures just moving again if you go to this site. Right. I'm not sure if you could see those figures moving on that petition website, but they were jumping. I'm not sure if the screen caught that during my screen sharing there. This is the latest on the ID cards. Our local governments, our national governments, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, have been fairly united in saying that they don't want them. Scotland has taken the decision to block any attempt to bring them in. So we're waiting to see what happens next. Now, I have to say, I don't want one, and I especially don't want the government to be holding a database with all of our details. It's true that they might not use it against me yet, but all it takes is the wheel of fortune to turn, a new government to come in, a higher crime rate, or a health crisis, and they will almost certainly use it to try to find out what I'm buying. So, just for the moment, it's not a good idea, in my opinion, to have ID cards. For those of you who are living in other countries with ID cards, you might be a little bit amused at how much we are reacting to this story. But I think it's just a very deep distrust of our government, and probably because we watched too many sci fi movies in the 1970s and 80s. By the way, if you're looking for a good sci fi movie from the 1970s and 80s, I recommend Logan's Run. That's where everyone is contained in a citadel and they don't know there's an outside world. They reach age 30 and they start to get killed off. And Logan, he discovers there's a world outside of this building. And I won't tell you the end of the movie, but you can find it on YouTube. It's very famous. So Logan's Run was probably one of the main ones that I watched in the 70s, which put me off the idea of the government holding any central database about me. And if you're interested in these kind of things, there's always George Orwell's 1984. People here love that, and they also love conspiracy theories. Well, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let's talk soon. See you. Bye.